Hopefully. Hello. Uh, hi everyone. Um, oh yeah, it's showing up on the Facebook window, so that's good. Um,
Yep, mine is too.
good.
We've cracked
Oh,
this.
we have one viewer. Hi, single viewer. Is that possibly one podcast gremlin? We'll never know. Um,
Who knows?
so yeah, welcome. This is the first ever Square Mile of Murder live stream. We don't know what we're doing. Hopefully, everything is working.
We are literally making it up as we go along.
Yes, very, very much so. Um, so, yeah, if this is the first time for some of you seeing us with your eyeballs instead of your earballs, this is what we look like.
We're going to have a conversation about airballs later.
Is that not how anatomy works? Uh,
Not really.
so yeah, so I'm Taylor. I'm the American one.
I'm Kat. I'm the English one.
Um, yeah, and so we hope you're watching now or in the future, at some point in time. We'll never know.
Yep. The internet is forever.
Yes, it,
Once it's out there, it ain't coming
it's
back.
there forever, which is a little terrifying. And maybe we should just rethink this whole thing and stop right here. Don't know.
So before we lose our nerve, today we are going to be talking about the hit Netflix show Tiger King, Murder, Mayhem, and Madness. And if you haven't seen the show, a round of applause because we're going to assume that you're either a key or frontline worker and just haven't had the time to watch it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the show is absolutely insane and I can see why it's become so popular. But everyone being stuck at home during this lockdown has definitely had something to do with its
Certainly,
popularity.
certainly helped things. Yeah, according to um, random things I found on the internet, 34.3 million people watched the show over its first 10 days of being up on Netflix. That's
Wow.
that's a lot.
That is that I mean it was the most popular Netflix show ever when it first came out in terms of like
Yeah. Yeah.
numbers, but it's been overtaken now though, hasn't it, by a new one. But I don't know what that one's
I
called.
don't know either.
I can't remember. I saw there was like something else that has like overtaken it now, but
I mean,
I don't think anything can beat it in terms of
no, I
notoriety.
mean it really was released at like exactly the perfect time um to sort of hit the big time, if you will. Because I
Yeah,
think it came
definitely.
out what like at the very end of March, and then at least here in the UK, the lockdown was like 2 days later or something. So
I think yeah, we went into lockdown on like the was it 23rd, 24th, something like
I think
that.
yeah, 24th.
And it was around I think it was literally a few days
Yeah.
before that it came out.
So
So maybe like the Friday before. So that was really well timed on Netflix's
amazing
behalf.
time, and you have to wonder if oh hi mom, thanks for joining. um you have to wonder like if the whole COVID-19 thing hadn't happened, if the show would have sort of gotten as big or as many eyeballs as it did.
I don't know. I think in terms of like sort of cult status and um in terms of like infamy and notoriety, I think it would have got there, but not as
Yeah,
quick.
for sure. um which I mean, like, maybe we should actually sort of vaguely hi mom, you've just tuned in. I know, I can see. I can see when you join. Um,
You know, that's like standing on stage and looking for your mum and waving when you do that.
well, it's not my fault she showed up. I didn't tell her to. Um, so yeah, maybe we should do a brief summary of the show. Although in our sort of like bullet points to hit plan, Kat has just written, for me, explains plot of Tiger King, which how?
This is what happens when you leave me to plan things. You know
I
this.
just like I don't know how exactly to explain it. I think we should start though by reading the Netflix description from the first episode of the show, which says, I put on my Netflix announcer voice. Meet Joe Exotic, the gun-toting operator of an Oklahoma big cat park. He's been accused of hiring someone to murder his chief rival, Carol Baskin.
I love that they call her
Chief
his
rival.
chief rival.
Like, they're not even in the same
Like,
state.
is she like the super boss and you've got to get through all the little bosses to get
Oh
to
god,
her?
yeah. She's
Is that how
is
it
she
works?
the final boss at the end of the level? She's Bowser. uh I I think that doesn't do it justice. Exactly.
No.
Um
And I was going to say, you know, now we all know what Tiger King is. We can talk about it and answer some questions. But I don't think we know what it is.
no.
And I've watched it twice and I'm still not sure I know what it is.
I've not watched it twice, but
Well,
I've listened to a podcast about the whole thing.
I watched it a couple of weeks after it came out. I was like, nope, not doing it, not falling into it. I'm bored, I'll watch it. And then I watched it again this last week to kind of plan this. And I did listen to bits of that podcast. I didn't listen to
I
all
haven't
of it.
finished yet,
So Joe is obviously the main person in the documentary, but it does focus on a lot of other big cat parks
Yes.
and people who own these cats and trade these cats and breed them and try to stop people doing those things as well.
Yes. It's a lot of cats, a lot of parks, a lot of a weird sort of cult dynamics all around.
Definitely.
Netflix seems to really want this series to be known as a true crime documentary, which I think is fair to say is why we're even kind of talking about it.
Yeah.
But I have issues with that categorization.
Yes, so do I.
Yeah.
It's not it I mean it's right there in the title, murder. Murder, mayhem and madness.
But,
and you know, 100 years ago you could be charged with mayhem.
yeah. You still can.
I'm still not entirely sure. Can
I
you?
had a friend in LA who was charged with mayhem. It was a whole thing, but like yes, you can. It's kind of a ridiculous
I did not know that was still a thing. But yeah, it's right there in the title, murder, but it's not really crimey.
no.
It is more about this kind of like almost cult of personality.
Yeah.
Is that the right phrase? Kind of surrounding Joe and surrounding Carol and the other owners like Doc Antle and it's
I'd say that like
the crime is kind of almost an afterthought.
yeah, I'd say that like the crime, like they mention it in the first episode, kind of sort of drop it in there, and then you're sort of waiting for the next 6 or 7 episodes being like, where's this murder?
Yeah.
Where's this crime? And like I guess technically you've got 2 major like murdery type things that occur or not occur, but like are discussed within the show. Um, but for the most part, it's about these zoos or rescues or park, big cat parks, sanctuaries, whatever they're called. So
Crazy cat people.
yes, that.
And as a crazy cat lady whose cat is thankfully sleeping at the moment, I can say 100% they are crazy cat people.
It's just they take it to another
That's how
level.
they lure you in. That's how they lure you in. They're like, oh, look, we got these really cute little cubs. And I'm like, oh, it's so cute. And I'm like, no, they're wild animals. They're not supposed to be there.
Yeah, not so much. um, yeah.
Yeah. I think the other crime we really have to talk about, Joe's hairdresser.
Yes.
I mean, we have quarantine hair right now, or lockdown hair. I mean, my fringe is like down to here. It also hasn't been cut free yet, but I was due a haircut. And my hair's gone insane. Taylor is rocking some very, very beautiful skunk stripes.
Hey now, I mean, but it's more like a reverse skunk.
You sent me a picture and said reverse
skunk, but it's green or blue or I don't know. It's whatever my hair wanted it to be, and it's being recorded now, and it'll probably be buzzed off by tomorrow.
But even despite our lockdown hair, we can safely say Joe's hair was something else.
It's like,
and that is a real crime that is not talked about.
It's like, is a dark top mullet and no, light top mullet with sort of like 90s bangs, and then long the mullet part in the back, and then short dark sides with a dear God, sorry, a big old mustache. So it's a lot. It's a lot of look. Does he pull it off?
Yeah,
maybe not so much, but
it's the confidence, though. I mean, that's the main thing that I get from that is like, okay, it doesn't really work, but he's got the confidence.
He doesn't really care.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the sort of a cast of characters is amazing, I have to say. Like, if you want to look at the documentary as just a slice of life with just some interesting humans, then it's good for that, I'd say.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start. So we will move on to, as if you've been following us on social media, you know we've been asking for questions. So our first question comes from Caroline on Facebook, and let's just get it out of the way. Did Carole Baskin kill her husband? What do you think? I'm not sure what we can legally say about this, so let's tread very carefully.
So in the show, they allege that Carole Baskin possibly killed her husband, Don Lewis, in like, was it 1997 or 8?
In the late 90s,
and then allegedly fed him to her tigers.
Yeah.
Well, and Joe alleges this at various points throughout the show. I don't really buy it. Like, I think that he has Don Lewis is probably not of this earth anymore, but I have no real theories of how that may have happened beyond maybe he ran into trouble trying to run away to Costa Rica or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's really great for selling newspapers with these like sensational headlines. And I'm kind of like, well, I can see how they came to that conclusion, but I'm not sure how much I buy into it.
Yeah.
She did act a bit strangely. Like when he first went missing, like if he'd been missing for like 4 days, oh, do you think I should call the police? Yeah, you
Like
probably
maybe a little
should,
bit. Yeah.
because he's been missing, not he's, like, oh, I'm going to so and so, and you just haven't heard from him for a few days. That's not, if someone goes away somewhere, that's not missing. This is nobody, not his wife, his kids, his ex-wife, his assistant, anybody. Nobody has heard
Yeah.
from him.
So
So
that's a little fishy.
I, yeah. And obviously everyone picked up on the, oh, if you want a tiger to eat somebody, you cover them in sardine oil. I mean, like, of course everyone was going to pick up on that. You're being accused, albeit by, Joe Exotic, of murdering your husband. Really? You want to say that to a camera crew and didn't think anyone was going to make anything of
Yeah,
it?
maybe don't. Well, which is maybe a good point to say that Carol Baskin has published a 3,000 word statement on her website refuting like various points that occur in the documentary series, and basically it starts out by saying that was when she was approached by the filmmakers, they told her that they were going to make essentially a black fish about like big cats and tigers and stuff. And then she was very disappointed by the end result. So if that's
Yeah.
how it was portrayed, like to her, that's the thing. We don't know what the filmmakers said to her in these interviews.
Yeah. And I mean, there's plenty of like filmmakers who might start with something and then it develops into something else and it doesn't go the way they thought it would.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
this has gone a long way from like a Blackfish style investigative documentary into animals in captivity to Carol Baskin killed her husband and is the villain of this piece because she wants to stop people to stop breeding tigers and big cats.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot. Well, and that's the thing, like, I think that obviously the documentary very much presents things from Joe's sort of, maybe not his point of view, but from, like, you're supposed to be empathizing with him. And, like,
Oh yeah, definitely.
that's kind of an issue because it lets you sort of like paint these other people, these other characters as these sort of like one-dimensional, two-dimensional, just not three-dimensional like villains and evil people.
Yeah.
And it's never
Like,
really that simple.
yeah, you're not really supposed to question anything that they say about Carol. You're just supposed to accept it as the gospel truth.
Which
When so that's a biased documentary
yes,
to start with. If you're going into it like that,
that's not really a good way to sort of present things on an even keel.
yeah. Yeah, and so on the complete opposite side of that question, which I think we sidestepped quite sneakily. So our mutual friend Madeline from uni, she literally just put patriarchy and why everyone only cares about Carol Baskin killing Don. Discuss.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. But I think it goes back to, like we said, it's a very, very biased documentary and you're supposed to be sympathizing with Joe and sort of other big cat zoos as opposed to like looking at it objectively and like why is she doing what she's doing, and everyone's kind of distracted by the whole, oh, she killed
Yeah.
Don. Well, we don't know when, probably unless they find his body or he just walks right in one
Yeah.
day. We're never going to know. But one thing I will say is I think so. Carol is essentially poacher turned gamekeeper. And I think that is a lot, from what I've read around it, a lot of people have that problem with her because she was breeding tigers throughout the 90s. She was like, not tigers, sorry, it was lynx and bobcat, wasn't it? That she was like buying from these auctions and she was breeding them, and they were doing like videos on how to breed and things like that, and how to like acclimate them to be house pets. And then she's like changed her mind, and I think she's kind of a victim of cancel culture in that way. Like, I hate cancel culture, but I fall into the trap because I'm like, no, she was going around doing all this breeding with the cats and she was making money off them, and now she is like, oh, the poor cats, poor cat. No. See, we all fall straight into it.
Yeah.
I hate cancel culture, but I've fallen into the trap.
Well, and it's tough because, like, basically what they do in the documentary is they present sort of Carol now, and they say, like, she's running this big cat rescue, and she, says to the camera, like, oh, I want to save the cats and all this stuff and keep them safe and rescue them, whatever. And then it takes you back and fills in these details of, like, well, didn't you know that actually she was breeding cats and she was doing this, and so it's like, hey, that thing that we just told you, you're wrong to think that this woman is the good guy. And so
yeah,
I think that's kind of an issue, which kind of leads me into my biggest issue with the show is, like, the passage of time and how it's portrayed, because it is mind-bendingly complicated and impossible to understand.
Yeah.
Like,
I think the only part you can actually nail down is the incredibly strange tangent of when he decided to run for president.
Yes.
And then governor. Which, had this happened in the 2012 elections, you'd have been like, no, that's absolutely crazy. Nobody could do that. But he was running against Donald Trump, so
against. he was.
I didn't say it was an even race. I just said they were both in the race.
But yes, like, it was not the strangest thing to happen in 2016, to be sure. But I think that, like, yeah, besides that, and besides, like, knowing that he is in jail or prison, depending on, I believe he was ultimately convicted in January of this year. So, like, I have no idea if those, like, prison phone calls are while he was on trial or afterwards, but, like, the timeline is so confusing, and the footage is from, like, 5+ years all put together, and I just don't know how to. When we were watching it, I kept being like, when is this happening? When is this in relation to everything else? And I think they kind of jump around too. They don't just go in chronological order.
Oh yeah.
So
and it's because they jump around so much, you can't even, like, make a little timeline of your own. Like, okay, so we started at this point, and then we get to the end and he's in prison. Yeah, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. But it doesn't just go in, like, a chronological order, like one after the other. It kind of goes forward and back and sideways and upside down and inside out.
Yeah, it's very confusing, which I think leads to, I mean, I think it helps the filmmakers sort of present that, like, this is Joe, you like Joe kind of thing, because they can, like, maneuver all around the actual order of events and stuff.
Yeah, and because they can do that, they can then be like, here's Carol, we're giving her to you on a silver platter, hate her, because the whole documentary, at some point, she's trying to sue him, But because the timeline's so messed up, we don't actually know at what point that was.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, you do. You hear about it like through the entire thing, but it wasn't happening for like 6 years. So
Mm.
it's very misleading, I think. And
Yeah.
let's see, I'm trying to circle back to Madeline's question. Patriarchy. Well,
Well, Joe spends the entire documentary inciting violence against Carol.
yes, absolutely.
She's, in that sense, she is the victim. If we take aside all the stuff about breeding the cats and everything, there is a man who, for years, is filming videos, shooting a lookalike in the face, blowing her up, all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff, inciting violence against her, threatening her, everything like that. And I know we've talked about it between the two of us. So the phone calls and everything, which again are all edited together
Yes.
and cut and paste and this, that, and the other. So we don't even know how much of that is in actual chronological order. But those phone calls where he like solicits someone to kill her, like, yeah, okay, that's what he was convicted of. But he should have been convicted a long time ago based on incitement of violence, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt at all that he was sort of, at the very least, running a sort of libel campaign against Carol
Mm.
and actively trying to destroy her business by, changing his
Yeah.
logo and sort of pretending to be her
Yeah.
and all these weird,
Mm.
crazy things. But like, yeah, at the very least, when you bring it down to the basics, here is this one guy, and he is relentlessly going after this woman, more or less because, like, I think she's a woman in this space, and I think that like this big cat space has a really like, you know, male energy, and like it's very like swaggery, like look at these beasts that
Mm.
we've tamed, and which in a way makes Joe an interesting character because he's so very gay. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think that like you don't see him going after Doc Antle, uh
No.
so
But you also don't see Doc Antle trying to sue him either.
yeah.
So
But I mean,
it's.
sh-
So I'm not obviously not
no,
defending
but
his hatred campaign against Carol, but if she hadn't kept going after him in court, he wouldn't have continued this campaign of hate. So I think that's why he doesn't go after any of the other like big cat owners. But again, like you say, it's a very masculine space, and she's a woman in this, and she's also trying to stop what they're
yeah,
doing.
exactly. So she's already,
She's a woman trying to ruin
yeah,
their
she's
fun.
already antagonistic in that way in their minds, and like, yeah, and of course with the crazy timeline, it's so hard to tell when he started sort of campaigning against her, if it was just after, like all this stuff with the copyright claims, and like it just gets so confusing. um
Yeah, it's kind of like what came first, the chicken or
yeah,
the egg? Did he hate her or did she hate
yeah,
him?
exactly.
I don't know.
Both.
I don't think they probably don't know
I
at this
think
point.
that's very true. um so oops, I didn't mean to do that. So what else should we discuss?
So yeah. So I saw in the news this morning that Joe's legal team are trying to get Trump to pardon him.
Yeah, I saw that.
What are your thoughts on that?
So all I've seen is the headlines. Although one of the headlines said something about Joe Exotic's legal team attempts to get a presidential pardon with bizarre video.
I haven't seen a bizarre
Okay.
video. I saw one article. It was like on the Independent website, but it comes via TMZ.
Oh,
So
yes. The most reputable of
okay, let's see if we
sources.
can get.
Um,
Um. So in a video released on Friday, so that would be
yes.
yesterday, by TMZ, Joe Exotic's legal counsel announces that, quote, a team the size of Texas, unquote, has been assembled to get him released from
Oh my
custody.
god.
And just before we went live, we were discussing how many names Joe has
Oh
and
my
which
god.
ones are his actual names. So, according to this article, his current name is Joseph Maldonado
Yes.
Passage.
Not his birth name of Shrivogel. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, I don't know.
So, so yeah, that was pretty much all it is. It's a team the size of Texas that are investigating the case, and they're gonna get him a presidential pardon,
Which
supposedly.
is kind of funny. So in the episode of the podcast that we released this week, we actually talked a little bit about a presidential pardon for Patty Hearst.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I was thinking of the one we
no,
recorded this week. I was thinking, wait,
there's
no,
no
no,
pardons in those. Um, but
no.
like, it's not. Well, Trump has been pardoning everyone, like left and right. So
Mm.
it may actually very well happen. Um, but generally speaking, not an
So,
easy way to go about getting someone released.
so can you explain to me and all of our non-US viewers and listeners how exactly a presidential pardon
I mean,
works?
no, but I'll try. Like, from my understanding, which is limited to eighth grade history class, basically, presidential pardons, you, the president at the time, they usually get a list from their advisors being like, these are potential people you could pardon to, either to further a certain agenda, to right some sort of seemingly like past wrong. Um, some famous pardon examples would be Nixon being pardoned for all of his Watergate and sort of corruption crimes by his
Oh,
vice president Ford, Gerald Ford. Um, yeah. Uh,
that question was actually in our family quiz last week.
see.
We did not get it. No, we have like a family Zoom quiz. And so there's like loads of groups of us, and there's me and my parents sat there going, who could it have been? I can't remember who we put, but it was wrong.
Abraham Lincoln.
No, we weren't that wrong. I think it could have been like Bush
Oh
Senior or
yeah,
something. We're like, who's Republican?
yeah.
And
No,
in the kind of right era, and we're like, yeah, I think it was probably like Bush Senior, but we were
well,
wrong.
yeah. Ford did it like pretty much right away. So, but so basically, when you get a presidential pardon, your record gets cleared of everything that was, you know, pardoned. So, like a specific crime, your conviction essentially gets vacated, and um, Trump has pardoned a bunch of his sort of friends,
Friends.
colleagues, cohorts. Um, and it's like I would have to say that if it wasn't this political climate right now, in any other sort of more standard presidency, it would never happen. But because he
No,
is the
but
Twitter president, like
a reality TV
it's
star.
a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, him and Joe do have a lot of things
The
in
hair
common.
color in particular.
I was going to say that just the insane hair, the reality show life, just not really knowing what they're doing from one day to the
Yeah,
next.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I also think that a lot of people have seen just how popular um, Tiger King has become or is or whatever,
Mm.
and they're like, oh, there's money here, let's get on this. So
Yeah,
that's kind of an
definitely.
issue when you're thinking about
I
those kinds of
mean,
things.
what are we doing?
We're not making any money from this.
No, but it's like a future plan. Like, we're sowing seeds.
Yes, okay. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, so that was in the news this morning. And I saw something in the news. I saw it this morning, but it came out 2 days ago. Um, so Joe Exotic's Oklahoma Zoo officially reopens to the public under the name of Tiger King Park.
So is this now owned by, this is owned by Jeff Lowe
Yes.
now?
So the park is it's now still now owned by Jeff Lowe, Joe's former business partner, and his wife Lauren, and apparently they were on scene at the reopening, greeting guests, and so was their hot nanny. Apparently, that whole
Oh,
thing just made my skin crawl.
that man has the audacity to look like that
Right?
and be saying his wife has to get back in the gym as soon as she's given birth. After she's been
Yeah.
induced as well. Like, okay, there could be medical reasons for being induced, but a lot of the time it's so you lose the weight quicker. It's a vanity thing. If it's not for medical reasons, there's no other need or reason to do it.
And it's just
And he's saying, "Oh, we've got to get a hot nanny, and you've got to get your ass back in the gym."
that whole
Said I wasn't going to swear on this, didn't we?
yeah. Gonna try not to. No,
Not happy.
that whole thing drove me crazy. I was sitting on the couch ranting for like 30 minutes. It's like, who does he think he is? Also, he's so terrifying looking with the, you know, bandana all the way down to his nose and the hat
I judge,
and
yeah, I judge anyone who wears a bandana under a
yeah.
hat. One or the other. Just
Like,
pick. The sun is not that strong that you need both to protect your
well,
head.
and that's the thing. Like, we get it. You're bald. Pick one and be done with it.
But he's not bald. He's got like the little bits of like baby curls down at the back of his
Ugh,
head, and
that's
they're grey.
gross.
Mhm.
But yes, so
So,
apparently the park reopened. So it's in Oklahoma. So I'm guessing that Oklahoma. Okay, yeah. The park, which had been closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, was allowed to reopen last weekend using social distancing and sanitation protocols. However, all the pictures from the park show attendees like shoulder to shoulder, all packed in these large groups, and they're doing the cub petting and all sitting on the grass next to each other. So there's that.
can we not
Yeah. So I'm assuming
just stay at
that
home?
Oklahoma is
It's cheaper.
it's less deadly. I'm assuming that Oklahoma is one of these states that have sort of lifted some of their restrictions in the past week or so, which is a whole nother live stream we could
Whole
do.
other thing.
But
I don't think my 5 brain cells can cope with
no.
that. The rest are all in hibernation for lockdown.
Yes.
I'm working on a 5 cell capacity at the
I
moment.
don't think I even have that many left.
As otherwise, I'm just going to get just my brain just can't handle it.
So yeah, and it's now named Tiger King Park. I mean, that's pretty smart. But again,
Is anything to do with this documentary smart though?
oh, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing I found really amusing when I was watching the documentary is like Jeff Lowe says that, when he started working with Joe, it was going well and then it went all to crap. He started working with James Garrity, it went well, then it all went to crap. And then the other guy at the end who was meant to be partnering with on the zoo and it all
yeah.
falls apart and I can't remember his
I
name.
remember.
And Jeff Lowe says, every time I start working with someone, it starts well and then it just completely all falls apart. And I'm like, there's one common denominator, and in that situation, it's
Yeah.
probably you. If you are the common thread holding all these things together, you might be the
Yeah.
problem.
I'm pretty sure he is the
Just saying.
problem. Also, like, the show kind of glosses over his federal crimes as well. Um,
Oh
and it's just
yeah.
like, oh yeah, when I was in Las Vegas in prison. So,
Mm. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, I was in Las Vegas. Yeah, but it doesn't count if you're in prison instead of the
yeah, it doesn't
casinos.
count if you're a guest
I'm
of the
sorry.
state, not a guest of the Bellagio. Like, it's not the same thing whatsoever.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I really want to know what both Jeff Lowe and James Garrity needed immunity for.
well,
And when they get to the whole thing about getting Joe um
supposedly hire someone to kill
to
Carol,
yeah,
which, like, cheapest
yeah,
cheapest
and they're
hitman
like
ever. By the way, $3,000.
oh yeah.
That's it.
Mm. Yeah, so like Jeff needs immunity, James needs immunity, and
Alan
is it
Glover, I
Alan?
think his name is.
Yeah. But also what exactly did he do apart from just take the money and
Run.
disappear for a while? So I mean, on the one hand, it's not theft because he's been given it, but he's been given it on the understanding that he's been hired as an assassin. So I'm not entirely sure whether it is a crime to not follow through on that.
Well,
It's not
it's
really
definitely a crime to
like
follow through. I don't know about the other way.
exactly, exactly. But is it like if you say you're going to do a job, you get paid up front or half up front, and then don't do it? You can't really take someone to like civil small claims court for that, can you?
Excuse me, sir. You didn't murder someone for me.
So
No, well, and like that's the thing. That whole situation. As much as I agree that, like, Joe should probably be in prison for a myriad of things involving, like, the Endangered Species Act and animal trafficking and all this stuff. The whole murder for hire thing just sort of smacked of entrapment to me.
yeah, that's my issue, and I think that's why it's been the documentary's been made the way it is so that you do feel that sympathy
Yes. Yeah.
for him. But again, all those conversations are cut and pasted together, and we don't know the full extent.
Yeah.
So there is that about it. But yeah, I felt very kind of strange about it. Like I say, incitement of violence and this hatred campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah, all day long. But they're actually hiring someone. I kind of feel a bit weird about
Yeah.
it.
And I mean, I read a quote from one of the jurors on his trial, and she was quoted as saying, like, don't believe everything you see in the documentary. It was very clear to us that he was guilty. So, like, that's
Yeah.
something to consider as well. Like, obviously, at trial, a lot of different things are going to be presented. And also, I think that in a lot of ways, the series kind of shoehorned the whole murder for hire thing in there. It just sort of like dropped it in at the end, and there was these little bits about it, but then all this other stuff going on, and so.
But by the time they do that, you're already supposed to really like Joe
Exactly.
and really hate
Exactly.
Carol. So you're not supposed to
Yeah,
question it.
it's all been built up to this sort of crescendo, and yeah. I mean, and I think that Netflix kind of has a history of doing this kind of production style with a few of their documentaries. If you look at, like, the very most first popular true crime documentary with Making a Murderer, it's been accused of, many of the same things. So,
Yeah. I must admit, I've not really looked into that because it's like I've watched the documentary, I've watched both seasons, and yeah, I've come to the conclusion that they want us to. He was set up, he shouldn't be in prison, blah, 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 blah. But I've never gone and looked at it from the other side.
yeah.
Partly because I just can't be bothered. It's not grabbed my attention enough for me to want to go and look at it myself. But yeah, you are supposed to feel sympathy for them. You're supposed to think that they're innocent. Yeah. And he had, like, is it Catherine Zellner?
Yes, Kathleen Zellner.
Like, one of the most badass wrongful conviction attorneys, and she couldn't get him out of prison.
She's still trying, but it's not working.
Yeah. So
no, I mean, and that's the thing, like, it's in that situation, as in this situation, like, you're shown the family, you're shown the hardship, you're shown, the few sort of redeeming qualities that can be fit for broadcast, and you're not shown the other families and, the other heartbreak, and so it's very sort of tough to say, like, well.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm always interested in when documentaries are so one-sided is when they're like, oh, we reached out to somebody for comments, but they didn't respond. And I'm like, how many times and how did you reach out for comment? Because a letter written at the very beginning, before anything's been said, anything's been recorded, isn't really reaching out for comment. It's asking if you want to get involved.
Yeah.
Like when you've got this documentary and you know exactly how you're gonna portray, like, say, like Stephen Avery and Brendan Massey, and it's like, okay, we've shown all their family. Did they actually show
Teresa
Hallback's family?
Not as much.
And how many people actually remember her name? Just, it's a while since I've watched it, so I can't actually remember exactly who's in it, but it's never the same extent. They've decided on the narrative, and they're not gonna let the facts get in the way.
And, like, I think also a lot of the sort of, when these questions get raised after these things get put out there, a lot of the rhetoric that comes from the filmmakers or Netflix, the production side of things, is very much like, well, that wasn't the focus of our documentary. It's like, we focused on Stephen Avery and his journey, or we focused on Joe and his journey. We weren't a Carol Baskin documentary. So, but I think that's a cop-out, because if you're telling the story, you have to tell the story. You can't just tell little bits of it. Otherwise, you're creating a sort of semi-fictionalized version of events. And that's just, I mean, it's entertainment. I guess that's part of it too. Yeah. But is it ethical?
But the truth is inconvenient.
Yes, exactly.
A lot of the time. So so one other point that was raised, I think it was when I was posting on Facebook when I first watched it. So Lizelle, who was one of our lecturers at university, she made the point about, like, the erasure of Joe's husbands being bisexual, which I find very interesting.
Yeah.
Because there's no, I was going to say there's no, like, middle ground. It's kind of like, oh, well, they married him and everyone thought they were gay, but then one of them went off with a woman. Obviously, Travis very tragically died. But, John Finlay then left Joe, and now is engaged to a woman and has a baby and all that. That doesn't, they're not mutually exclusive. That's what bisexuality
Yeah.
is.
And even a lot of the articles that I've read after the fact, that they'll say like, oh, part of the draw of this documentary is watching Joe Exotic seduce these straight men, and then we find out they were straight all along, and it's like, that's not the only option. That's not necessarily how that
No,
works. um,
no. It, yeah, it's, it just completely erases them. And, the other issue that's obviously brought up with that is Saf, who is misgendered throughout the entire documentary.
yes.
Although he does say in the, like the episode, like the reunion lockdown episode that they did, that it didn't bother him as much as it bothered everyone else. But you can see that it wasn't just one thing. It was that and Joe's husband's.
Yeah, it was sort of a systematic
sorry.
Issue
Yeah.
at hand.
Yeah. But going back to Joe's husband's, he met them when they were very young, and he was a lot older than them.
Yep.
And I think it's the campaign manager says, because he's asked, oh, was there ever anything romantic between you and Joe? And he's like, no, I was too old. He likes them young and dumb. And I'm like,
oh,
that's predatory.
Yeah, no kidding.
When you want someone like 16, 17 who doesn't know any better. That's essentially what you're saying if you say young and dumb.
Well, and also,
you want someone who's young and doesn't know any better.
It does not, it doesn't paint a good picture of refuting this sort of common television and movie trope of the predatory gay man, because
absolutely.
He's an interesting sort of case study for like gay men on TV, because he's outdoorsy and he carries a gun and all this stuff, but he's also like really like flashy and campy and very gay and in your face about it.
Yeah.
And
it's almost like he's his own person and not a trope.
Right?
Imagine that.
Despite how hard they try to make him into one. But like, yeah, it very much, I think that, and like there's a sort of association, I think, in a lot of people's minds in pop culture between like Tigers and Siegfried and Roy, who actually Roy died today or yesterday, unfortunately. But like there's sort of these undercurrents of like gay pop culture and Tigers and
yeah.
But like, like you said, like it's so creepy that he's just picking up these teenagers basically.
Yeah.
And
I know that Travis, the 1/3 of the throuple, he very tragically died. Did he do it on purpose? Was it an accident? We don't know. But he was apparently just stoned all the time, and Joe just bought him guns and trucks and quad bikes and basically just gave them what they wanted, gave them loads of drugs. And that is like combined with the whole young and dumb comment, I was like, that was the nail on the head for me. I was like, yeah, you can shower someone with gifts, especially if like lots of people with these big flashy personalities are really insecure. So maybe he is just trying to buy their love. But the whole young and dumb thing and all the drugs, I was like,
yeah,
no.
The drugs are sort of an issue in general, and I thought it was really interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think through the entire thing, we don't hear anything about Joe doing any drugs, or like for the most part.
I think it's mentioned in passing that he's like had issues, or I might be mistaking him with someone else because I know there's a few who say they've had their issues with alcohol and substance abuse. I'm not sure. I can't remember for
At the
Joe.
very
But I
least.
mean, it's very heavily
Well,
implied.
but like, they don't go out and make a point to be like, and Joe was doing meth at this time. And like, I think that feeds into the sort of, they want you to like him. They want you to know that his husband has no teeth from meth, but they're not gonna,
And has now left him and has a
and has
baby with
teeth
a
again.
woman. And
And
oh
like,
yeah, oh yeah, you weren't supposed to know he has teeth again though. That was the
right,
reunion
yes.
bit.
But apparently they had footage of his new teeth and they just
You're
chose
supposed-
not to use it, which is another like issue.
Yeah, they wanted to portray him as a meth head, which, like you say, is another issue because he says in the follow up episode, I think he said he'd been clean for like 4 years when a lot of that was filmed.
4 or 5 years. So yeah, there's just a lot of crafting the narrative to go one way or the other.
Oh yeah,
Which is the nature of these sort of things, unfortunately. But it's also good to sort of take a step back and, do more looking into what's been presented.
Yeah. Take a look behind the throne
Behind
of
the
Tiger King.
throne. Oh my god, it's just. I think it's a wild ride of a show, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah.
It's just that when you look too closely at it, it starts to become problematic.
Yeah. But I think because of how much, like how popular it's become, and it's like already got this kind of like pop culture kind of icon status thing going on, we do need to look closer. Because I was thinking about this before, if he gets pardoned by Trump, Carol Baskin's going to end up dead. Because he's going to be vindicated. No, that's not the word I mean. Yes. He's going to basically be unstoppable because the president has said, oh, it doesn't matter. And he's going to go back to his campaign of hatred. And on top of that, you've now got all these fans of his.
See, I would be more worried about the fans doing something. I think...
Oh yeah, I'm not saying necessarily that he would kill her himself. But somebody, I would be very worried if he was pardoned. I'd be very worried for her.
I mean, well, and I think that unfortunately, through all of this stuff that the media is really hanging their hats on is the sort of interpersonal drama and not the exotic cat trade stuff. And that's the problem. That's like, all these other things are problems, but like on a larger scale, that's the thing that we should really be taking away from this, I think. Like take all the other stuff away, but also remember that there's this other sort of...
I think that kind of sums up everything really nicely because the cats are just a prop. They're a prop in the cub petting, in the shows at the mall, in the sanctuaries, let's be honest. And now they're just a prop with the media. It's kind of like, they're there, but, there's this really horrible woman that wants people to stop breeding cats.
How dare she? Well, and that's the thing.
Yeah. People shouldn't be breeding big cats in their back garden.
And, like, it sort of becomes more king, less tiger. Like, it's the focus gets shifted. Maybe not for the worse, but
that's mentioned. That's mentioned in one episode is that Joe has, because he perceives himself as being the Tiger King, he thinks that his kingdom is under threat because of Carol Baskin and campaigning for reforms in like exotic animal trade.
Yeah.
And people do stupid things when they're under threat
Boy, do they.
or
Yes.
think they're
Well,
under
that's the
threat.
thing. I think a lot of imagined threat.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
that is everything. It's very, and we've only got Joe's word
Yeah.
for a lot of it.
We get pretty much his side of the story.
So,
yeah.
yeah. And I think our final thought, because we have been talking for about an hour now, so if you stuck with us,
yeah, really,
thanks. A question that came in on Facebook was, did Joe ever financially recover from this? If he gets out, I think he's going to be set.
Fine,
I think he'll be all right.
But in the interim, I think he has not financially recovered.
Depends who's topping up his commissary.
It's Netflix, because if Netflix is, he's gonna be the belle of the cell block, I think.
You never know.
Yeah,
the belle of the cell. Try saying that.
But yes, I think that he'll do fine if he ever gets out. Maybe before then, depending on profiting from your crimes laws in Texas. I think he's in Texas, incarcerated in Texas.
What is the law in the US on profiting from crimes?
Wrong person. He's incarcerated in Fort Worth. I don't know. I think it depends on the state, and I think it also depends on like victims of crimes can petition the courts to say like put out an order saying you can't profit from this. Like if you've seen The Staircase, that's a good example of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have, but I kind of got a bit bored with it.
You don't think murderous owls?
I don't believe him. They just got too far. Just got too far fetched. Too far fetched.
Yeah.
No, I kind of no. I have seen it, but I'd need to rewatch it to.
Maybe that's
to
our next one. Or maybe anyone who comes across this is gonna be like, please don't ever do this again. In which case, we won't. Don't worry.
We'll go back to normal criticism. And you won't have to see our faces. Taylor's better at that than me.
But yeah, I think to sum up our thoughts on Tiger King, let's see.
I can't swear, so I can't really do that very well.
I think my thoughts are tricky production, great entertainment.
Yeah, I think that's better than I could have ever summed it up. Yeah, it as at pure face level, like face value, great entertainment, but when you actually stop and think about it, very questionable in every aspect, especially the hair.
Always the hair. Yeah. So thanks for coming and watching, Mom. Thank you for watching. I think you might be the only one at this point. But yeah, we'll go back to not showing you our faces next week with a new episode, which will be out everywhere on Wednesday.
But if you did like seeing our faces and want us to do more of these, tell us and give us suggestions of what show or film we should talk about. I have one in mind, but we will have to discuss this later. As I don't know how you're going to feel about it.
That's a good sign. Yeah, like here's the thing. we've seen them all, and if we haven't seen them, we'll
Yeah,
watch them. So
there's the bar is very
very
low as to
low.
what we won't watch for
Yeah,
research
of course.
purposes,
It's not
obviously.
nothing else. Yeah. So
So
yeah, let us know.
yeah,
And or if you want us to never do this again, let us know. And in the meantime, we'll be here on the Facebook page and on Instagram, and you can talk to us and send us your Tiger King thoughts and yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
um,
And we might see you
yeah,
again. We
yeah,
might never
you might
see you
never see. It's
again.
a whole thing.
might just go might just go back to the
Yes.
airballs thing, which we are still
Oh
going to have
god.
to discuss because I have questions.
Yeah. So thanks for hanging out, and
So
we'll
yeah,
see you
thank
guys
you.
later, or
Well,
not. Who knows?
yeah, maybe, but yeah, we'll be back on the podcast on
Yes.
Wednesday anyway. So
Until then.
until then.
Bye.